I'm in the Melbourne Museum at the moment, wandering around trying to find where McCoy's gorillas have gone, or indeed any of the other exhibitions that they had on notable people like Baldwin Spencer from Melbourne. And they've just gone. They've given away to the First World War. So what I'm going to do is walk through to the evolution section of the gallery to see what I can find there. It's expanded quite considerably in recent years. It seems to be fulfilling something more of the taxonomic principles that you would find in a natural history museum, aside from in this little area here, all bright and shiny, which is dedicated to our man Charles Darwin. And here he is. Changed the way we view our world. The usual kind of quote exhibits that we see in these kind of exhibitions about discovering evolution. Strangely got a quote from the, I think it would be the second or third edition of The Voyage of the Beagle, 1845. There was no book called The Voyage of the Beagle, so we're talking about Journal of Researches, Volume 3. And yeah, nice little exhibit. Some of the things that he found, labelling Wallace as Darwin's competitor, that's really quite surprising. And just giving a very brief and general overview of the whole evolution through natural selection, using whatever things they've got in the museum to exhibit them. Some cool snakes talking about sexual selection. And this is really supposed to be a kind of beginner's guide to the way that evolution functions. Fishes. What are the fishes doing there? Evolution in action.
This creates a new double helix, which can divide again and again and again.
And we've got a very good explanation for beginners of DNA. So by the time you're through here, you should have a pretty good idea of the way that evolution is going on. And there's our relatives over there. Not the real live people, but the skulls. But I can't find the gorillas anywhere. Where have they gone? I'll walk down the stairs and see if they're down there. Bit of jolty. Need a handy cam, steady cam while I'm doing this. As I say, far more your traditional type of natural history museum scenario going on here. Stuffed animals coming out of your eyeballs. The pinnacle of evolution, the zebra. No, can't mean that. You can see pandas, polar bears, but where have the gorillas gone? I can't find them anywhere. One of the foundational parts of Melbourne's contribution to the history of evolution and the debates over it just seem to have disappeared. Can't find the gorillas anywhere. They've gone. Well, I've done a big trawl through the whole museum, and the answer is, as far as I can see, that the gorillas have gone, or at least they've gone for now. I'll do a bit more digging with my contacts to see whether they'll be coming back after the First World War, but for now, McCoy's exhibit, which was intended to persuade people that Darwinism was a fallacy rather than a fact has gone the way of, I don't know, it's probably stuck somewhere out the back with the other exhibits which never make it onto display.
Why was I in fake despair about the disappearance of the gorillas? Or was it fake despair? Well, actually, it wasn't that fake, because the gorillas play an important part in our story. And in this case, it is our story, because it tells of the way that evolution through natural selection was greeted in Melbourne. The University of Melbourne was founded in 1853. The city was in the throes of the gold rush. Thousands of people were pouring in every week, looking to make their fortunes. There was a general feeling among the Melbourne elite that the city should create institutions that would reflect its newfound wealth and status, the type of institutions that a real world-class metropolis would possess. These included libraries and courthouses, parliaments and civic chambers. A university was also a marker of a properly cultured city, a place where the young, wealthy men of the colony of Victoria could get a good education without having to travel back to Europe. At its foundation, it was incredibly small, but the expectation was, of course, that it would grow significantly and rapidly. But first, they needed to appoint professors to teach the young men, and where better to find these than back in Britain? Advertisements were sent back to the old country looking for said professors in medicine, law, the classics and natural history, or natural science as it was then called. The process of recruitment was significant. It involved selection by committee. One of the committee was based in the colony, the judge Sir William Beckett. The others were on the ground in Britain. The barrister Robert Lowe had been a politician in New South Wales, but had returned to England in 1850, where he had won a seat in the House of Commons. At the time of McCoy's appointment, he was Joint Secretary of the Board of Control, which meant that he could act as a de facto agent for Melburnian interests. Professor Harry Morden was a classicist based at the University College London. The other two members of the panel were astronomers, Sir John Herschel and George Biddell Airy. Herschel was born into astronomy. His father was William Herschel, the astronomer and composer who had discovered Neptune with a telescope he had built himself. Educated at Cambridge, John became president of the Royal Society, so he possessed all the hallmarks and the views of the natural theologians. Through reason, he said in his celebrated preliminary discourse on the study of natural philosophy, sometimes regarded as one of the foundational texts of the history and philosophy of science, through reason, man is led to the conception of a power and an intelligence superior to his own, and adequate to the production and maintenance of all that he sees in nature. George Biddell Airy was of a similar stamp, Cambridge educated and thoroughly integrated into the Sedgwick-Henslow set. His scholarly work in mathematics and astronomy was not inclined to Paleite exaltations, but his religious beliefs indicate that he was unlikely to be a sympathiser of Darwin. McCoy, the man they chose for the Melbourne science position, was Irish. The son of an Anglican Dublin doctor, he too studied for medicine. But as seems to be the way with some, including Darwin, his interest gravitated towards geology and then paleontology. From 1846 until the early 1850s, he worked for and with Adam Sedgwick, who you'll remember as the savager of vestiges and a formidable opponent of transmutation. And McCoy was in charge of the arrangement of the fossils in the Woodwardian Museum in Cambridge. Sedgwick and McCoy were jointly responsible for a synopsis of the classification of British Paleozoic rocks, 1855. But before the publication of this monumental work, he had been appointed Professor of Geology at Queen's College, Belfast. In 1854, he got the job at Melbourne, where he lectured for the best part of 30 years. He was also responsible for founding what became the Melbourne Museum. His large collection of natural history specimens was housed over in Old Quad and formed the basis for the city's collection. Indeed, the museum was grand enough to be entitled the National Museum of Victoria, and the collection spanned natural history to geology to anthropology and back again. McCoy was a natural anti-Darwinian. His education was straight out of Paley's natural theology. His collaborators and patrons were resolutely opposed to transformism, and this was the baggage he brought to Australia. McCoy was one of the most potent promoters of acclimatisation. In fact, he was one of the founders of the Acclimatisation Society of Victoria, the organisation that went on to found the Melbourne Zoo. Acclimatisation was the process that gave us starlings, rabbits, foxes, trouts and many other non-native species. We now see it as a deeply damaging process, a threat to the fragile ecology of our island continent. But at the time, McCoy was driven by the idea that there were gaps in Australian nature that needed to be filled, that somehow or other the process of special creation had left niches that an imported animal could fill and thrive in. It is a logic that runs very much counter to Darwinian natural selection, which if thought through properly would counsel against doing such things. I'm sure Darwin would have seen the potential for the destruction of the ecology of the tangled bank. And, as we'll see, McCoy's views on acclimatisation emerged out of his worldview, which combines science and religion in the authorised Paleite prescription. When Origin came out, McCoy proved himself an implacable opponent of Darwinian views, and at the university and in public lectures and in the press he took every opportunity to attack the new theory, vigorously maintaining his anti-transformist worldview.